Hi fellow bibliophiles, and welcome back to Blatantly Bookish. I'm Marissa, and today I'm here to talk to you guys about borrowing books and lending books. This topic was inspired by me recently receiving the copy that I ordered of Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore by Robin Sloan. Now, I absolutely loved this book when I read it a year and a half or 2 years ago. It's just this surreal adventure mystery about book lovers, for book lovers, and I just could not get enough of this book. And then I sent it to one of my friends who was having a bit of a hard time. She was in a reading slump and she could use a little pick-me-up, so I sent her this little care package of tea and books, of specifically my copy of this book and my copy of The Air Affair by Jasper Fforde. And I didn't really specify whether I ever needed them back or not, but it soon became clear that I just was never going to get those books back. And it was very important to me to own a copy of Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore, so I reordered it and I got it recently in the mail, and I thought, why not film a video all about borrowing and lending books? So do you guys borrow books? Do you guys lend books? When thinking about this topic, I thought of this little encounter, but I also was thinking about the famous line from Shakespeare, "Neither a borrower nor a lender be." In Act 1, Scene 3 of Hamlet, Polonius counsels his son Laertes that neither a borrower nor a lender be, for loan oft loses both itself and friend. The line is a warning of the dangers of borrowing and lending money specifically, because it's awkward and possibly detrimental to the friendship when you loan money to someone and they cannot pay it back. On the other hand, there's a stigma about borrowing money that can also ruin friendships. One might feel indebted to their friend, and it can change the dynamic of the friendship entirely. People might also feel shamed or embarrassed of the necessity to borrow money in the first place. As a side note, it's important to realize that this quote is part of a longer monologue composed entirely of aphorisms, most of which are actually contradicted by later events. Polonius turns out to be a fool of a character in Hamlet. Nonetheless, the phrase "neither a borrower nor a lender be" is used usually in earnest nowadays. Now, books are not money, though they can be quite sentimental and special to book lovers like us. But how do you feel about borrowing or lending books? Have you ever been a book borrower, besides from the library? Have you ever been a lender, or both perhaps? Have you ever actually lost a friend over a borrowed book? I am very, very lucky in that I have never lost a friend over a borrowed book, but I have heard stories of people who have. I can pretty much count on one hand the times that I've borrowed or lent books to other people, and I obviously just told you one of those stories. So I think I've only borrowed a book from a friend once, and I have no intentions of giving it back. And that might sound very, very bad, but you'll hear the story and perhaps it's not. So the book that I have borrowed since high school, still haven't read, and will probably not be giving back, is Gone with the Wind. Now, I actually borrowed this from the same friend that I sent Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookshop and The Air Affair to, and she had 2 copies of it, saw me looking at it, and said, "Oh, why don't you take it?" And it was unclear whether I ever needed to give it back or not, but it's the only copy of Gone with the Wind I have, and she already has another copy, so I really just don't feel the need to give it back, though I do feel the need to remember that it was originally hers and to take really good care of it. So it is on my shelves. I don't know if I'll read it, when I'll read it. It's not super high on my priority list at the moment, although I do know it's a lot of people's absolute favorites. And then recently I was at work and one of my coworkers was talking about some of his favorite books. He knows I absolutely love reading, and he said that he would bring one in for me. And he did, and it was A Confederacy of Dunces by John Kennedy Toole. Now, I took the book, I brought it home, and that night he said, "I need it back. I haven't read it yet." He wanted to read it for a second time, but I completely misunderstood the situation and thought he wanted me to have it. I've since gotten my own copy. That's what I'm holding up right now. But I was very confused and puzzled by the situation. And I feel like lending books and borrowing books is something that can be kind of confusing like that. Like, you don't know if somebody is giving it to you or just giving it to you for the time being. I don't know. But anyway, I also gave him a book which I do not intend to get back, and that is God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater by Kurt Vonnegut. I have not heard from him if he's read it or if he plans on reading it, or if he plans on returning it, but I assume I will not be getting it back in the near future or possibly ever. And that is okay. I think books are meant to be shared. I read that this past year, I believe, and I wrote all my little notes in it, and I'm okay with having that out in the world. Another fun lending experience I had was when I found out that one of my best friends from high school has not read The Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I absolutely adore this book, and the Hulu series is amazing. She hadn't read it, so I gave it to her one day and said, "Here, read it, enjoy it." And then I kind of missed it on my shelves after a good 6 months, and the next time I was over at her place, I said, "Oh look, it's my copy of The Handmaid's Tale. Can I take it back now?" And I just sort of took it back, because this one is just too sentimental for me to lose. This book helped me get out of a really, really bad reading slump, possibly the worst I've ever had in dental school. So yes, it's one I find comfort in having on my shelves, and I'm not willing to part with at this point in time. But I told my friend she still has to read it, but everyone has it in the library, and I'm sure she can get it elsewhere. In high school, I lent my copy of Vanishing Acts by Jodi Picoult to a friend, and I saw that book on her shelf years later and asked her about it. Was that mine? Was that my copy? And she said no, but I'm pretty sure the answer was yes. But it was okay because I realized I had read that book already and I wasn't quite the book hoarder I am now back then, so I just kind of let her have it and hoped that she enjoyed it. I think a lot of my stories about lending books are that if I'm willing to lend it to you, I am willing to also give it to you. I don't think, with the exception of The Handmaid's Tale, I don't think there's a book that I've lent that I'm not willing to give permanently as well. So yes. I lent most of my childhood favorites to my boyfriend when I was away at school, but I guess that doesn't really count because then I moved back in with him and they're all in my possession again. And then the other book I can think of, the only other book I can think of that I lent to somebody was Me Talk Pretty One Day by David Sedaris. This friend read it, loved it, offered to give it back to me, which he receives great credit for, but it didn't work out with our timing, and so he still has it somewhere, I believe, or maybe he donated it. I don't really know. That book is not super sentimental to me. I don't feel a loss by not having it on my shelves, so I'm okay with that. So those are some of my personal experiences with borrowing and lending books. I'm really curious to hear if you've had similar experiences, how you feel about lending books. Do you do it? Do you not do it? Would you lend me a book? No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to ask you to lend me a book. Don't worry. I know it's a touchy subject for us on BookTube, and I look forward to hearing what you have to say on the topic in the comments down below. I look forward to seeing you in another video soon. Bye!